if you're going to be a landman, if you really want to be a landman, make the commitment to it and be willing to pay the price that it takes to be successful. And that's going to be hard work, and you got to be dependable, and you got to be consistent. You got to be willing to learn and never stop learning. And you got to be, honest. You got to bring a lot of integrity.
Welcome to the Land Department Podcast. The state of land and energy as we see it.
Brandon, I know that we're going to have some great stories today. I want to start with a story from you about how you met Jack Clark. It's got to be a good one, I'm sure.
Well, I meant to talk to you about this before the podcast. It wasn't that great. There was nothing just supernatural about it. It was work. Tom Havenstreit identified, and Jack and Tom Havenstreit identified a need that Derby needed on the back office side. And we came in. I was under the disguise of Associated Resource at that point, and talked to them about what their needs were. We never ended up doing any work for Derby on the ARI side, but gave me a great opportunity to meet somebody I truly respect and enjoy their company now. Jack Clark is a heck of a guy and a very smart and knowledgeable landman. And we've done a lot of hunting and shooting and hanging out since. So it's he's definitely been a blessing in my life. And I also want to say, Khalil, that stash that you got going on right now, legit.
Little caterpillar. It's a miracle that I still have it and that my wife hasn't killed me for keeping it. So yeah. it probably won't last much longer. Man, Jack, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. I can already tell that we're going to enjoy this, and I like the energy you've got. You're a Norman guy. I'm a Norman guy. We're gonna have fun today. First impressions of working with Brandon. I'm sure that he was a little bit younger when you first worked with him.
Yeah. First impressions of Brandon. Well, I mean, it was evident to me early on that he was bright. And of course, I've known Tom Havenstreit for 30 years, but just an acquaintance for about 23 or 4 of those years. And I got to know Tom a lot better beginning about 6 years ago when I reached the Dudley Land Company and they began doing Derby's brokerage work. And a lot of respect for Tom. Of course, Tom Dudley, I can remember when I started in the industry. I mean, Dudley Land Company, because I was a field guy. A majority of my career was in the field and as a contract landman. And, Dudley Land Company was the bar of excellence. They were doing things before everybody else, and they were just a big brokerage firm, and they did excellent work. And so I finally got to know Tom beginning in about, I guess, 16 or something like that. And we became good friends, and learning about Dudley Land Company from Tom Havenstreit's perspective, and then having Dudley Land Company do my brokerage work. And of course, I'm an old broker, smaller broker than DLC, but just watching their processes and their people and their professionalism and the level of quality work that they delivered for a great price. I mean, I was just always continually impressed, and in that respect just grew as I began meeting the guys that make it happen at DLC. And so I knew when I first met Brandon that he was a sharp guy, or he wouldn't have been in the position he was in, because Mr. Havenstreit didn't put anybody that wasn't a sharp guy in those kind of positions. And so it was fun. We, as Brandon said, we didn't end up getting to do anything with ARI at that point in time, but they've taken care of all of our brokerage needs for the last 5 or 6 years. And I think we'll continue to do so for a long time. And like Brandon said, we got to do some hunting, and I think we played a round of golf.
Yeah, you took me over to what's that course over there in Chandler? Buffalo Rock.
Yeah. We went up to Buffalo Rock. That's
Cushing.
in Cushing, actually, not
So,
Chandler. Yeah, Cushing. Neat old course. And so we've done everything but fishing. I was thinking earlier today, it's Friday, and every good landman ought to be thinking about hunting or fishing or golfing, but it's a little chilly outside.
Yeah.
So anyway,
well, we're going to
cool.
do some fishing here pretty soon. We talked about that the other day. We'll go down to the lease and make that happen.
yeah, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Take some grandkids down there.
That'll be good. Well, Jack, you've had a storied career in the land industry. I want to get a little bit of background, though. How did you get started back in the day, young Jack? How did you get started in the land industry?
Khalil, as we've discussed, I was a Norman guy. I graduated high school, Norman High, and I went off to played 2 years of college, junior college baseball, and then came back to OU in the fall of '79. And I was trying to think how I got in the PLM program. I mean, and I could not recall a conversation with anybody that specifically guided me that way. It was just a real popular degree program at the time. It was 1979. The deep gas play was going on in the Anadarko Basin, and so I got in the program, and was fortunate in that I got about 6 or 8 weeks of interning type work that first summer of 1980. I guess I finished 1 year in the PLM program, and I interned that summer. Was back in school in the fall of '80, and had to deal with the reality that we were beginning a family a little sooner than we thought. And and at the time, we didn't have insurance, and I mean, I had to go to work. I left school and I went to work for $75 a day, and went to work as a full-time contract landman. I did go back to school at nights in the late '90s, and ended up getting a bachelor's degree for primarily the purpose of being able to tell my kids, look, I did it. You need to get it done too. So that's how I got started. I worked for about 4 years as a young landman to '84, and predominantly for the same brokerage firm that I ended up spending 11, 12 years of my career at, I guess, over 2 different windows of time. But in '84, Penn Square had happened, and I was just starving to death. And I mean, nobody had any work. And so I left the industry for about 7 years. But then that same brokerage firm called me in '91 and said, hey, we got some land work if you'd be interested. And I didn't like what I was doing, and was just thrilled at the opportunity to get back into contract land work. And that's what I've done ever since 1991. So I've got about 36 years all total, I guess.
Will you talk a little bit about Penn Square for a minute? I mean, it's before I was born. I know it's fairly common and familiar in the industry, but what was that like being a landman during that time, and how quick did everything go?
Well, it went fast. To me, 2008 was real similar after the housing bubble. I mean, I was so young that it was kind of difficult for me to see the big perspective of it all when Penn Square went down. I mean, all I knew is nobody had any work for me. I kept knocking every door I could, and just nobody had any work. And so it was a difficult time. I mean, a lot of companies, upside down and that type thing. But I was so young in the industry that I wasn't tuned in to too much what was going on up the ladder in the big corporations. All I knew is I had, by '84, I had 2 mouths to feed, and I had to be able to make an income, and that caused me to leave. But I think, Khalil, it was similar to '08. I can tell you, my little brokerage firm did that housing bubble deal. I mean, the revenues that my firm generated in 2008, that housing bubble broke in late 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter of '08. But in 2009, we did 10% of the total revenues that we did for the year in 2008. So 90% of our business went
Wow.
away. And I think Penn Square was similar to that for a lot of landmen, a lot of brokerage firms, a lot of service companies.
Gotcha. What got you into starting your own brokerage? When does that come into play in your story?
Well, I went back to work for Texoma Land. That's the guys I started with, two landmen named Jeff Miller and David Vaughn. I know Jeff's retired. I think David is too. Really good contract landmen, guys that were really influential in my career in that they just did good land work, and they both had a mentoring personality, a teaching personality, but and I'd been friends with Jeff for a long time. Jeff and I played baseball together, high school Legion ball. Jeff was a year older than myself, but they called me in '91, and they had a pretty big ticket. I believe it was for Barrett Resources out of Denver. Said, "Hey, we got quite a bit of work. Would you be interested in getting back into land?" And like I said earlier, I jumped at the opportunity because I hated what I was doing, and I worked there from '91 to '98, so another 7 years. In the last 2 or 3 years, I was a project lead, so I got to head up some projects and that type of thing, and I actually was able in my last couple of years there to go out and secure some work for the brokerage firm through some contacts I'd met, and that was exciting to me, and I was tickled about that because I felt like in some small way I was paying Jeff and David back or provide or being some type of return on all the time and efforts that they made and helping me to become a landman. But at that point in time too, Khalil, I had 4 kids by that time, and let's see, in '98 they'd have been like 18, 16, 13, and 11. And I'm like, man, how am I going to get these kids through college and so on and so forth? And so I decided to hang a shingle, and I did. And I think those first 2 or 3 years of JC Land's existence, about half the time I was working for JC Land, and about half the time I was working for Texoma or J.O. Easley or whoever else had work because I didn't have it, and I was looking for it, hunting for it, and we finally got a pretty good Chesapeake ticket in, I think it was 2001, 2002, Larry Coe show. We did a bunch of work for him on just curative type, diligence type work on their lease files, and it was about a 1.5 or 2 year project that allowed my little firm to put, I don't know, 6 or 8 people. Keep 6 or 8 people working, but it was a big enough ticket to help us get a little foundation under us, and then we continued to grow, and but that's how I got started. I was kind of driven. I just needed to try to make a little more money.
There's probably landmen out there that have considered maybe becoming a broker, think that they might be able to do that job fairly well, those field landmen. What are some of the differences and things that you didn't expect going into becoming a broker after being a field landman?
I think I knew intuitively a little bit, but I really didn't understand the difficulty in managing through the ups and downs, and how critical that was. That's why I listened to Tom Dudley and Tom Havenstright's story, what they've done with DLC, and just, had a ton of respect, because in my circle, they managed through those difficulties better than about anybody else I know, in a more professional way, in a more corporate way. I mean, a lot of brokers just, when the faucets turn off, they just lay everybody down and everybody goes away and they just hunker down and survive. And we went through a period at JC Land where we had a lot of growth from like 2001 to 2008. We had went from a 10 contractor brokerage firm to 60, 65 people. And boy, that thing hit at the end of 2008. And we had, I don't know, we had 20, 25, 30 core staff people that we had spent a lot of time training and invested a lot of effort in, because the challenge at that point in time was to find managers. I always used to say, all the good landmen, or a lot of the old experienced landmen at that time, they didn't want to manage anything. They didn't want to manage anybody. Just give me my portion of the work and I'm going to go do it and leave me be, so to speak. But which I could understand. And but we worked hard at building people. And then 2009 came and we just had no work and no revenue. And unlike a lot of the brokers, I think I mentioned to Brandon, I related to what Tom Dudley said in his podcast, that because I, like Tom, I wasn't great at letting people go. And especially when we had spent a lot of time in the effort to help them get to where they were in their skill sets. And also knowing that they had kids at home they were feeding and mortgages to pay. And so for 2009, we kept a lot of people working probably too long. It really adversely affected JC Land going forward. And it left me at a point in time. I remember my accountant told me, she said, when are you going to let some more of these people go? When you run out of money to pay them? And I said, it kind of looks that way, doesn't it? Because we burned through a lot of reserves in 2009. But back to your question, Khalil, I didn't truly understand how difficult that was going to be to manage.
Yeah, I think what Dudley Land has done, and just like Jack said, and through history, is diversified themselves enough, whether that be by region or by type of work, or by training landmen to do different things, to stay relevant. The downtimes hit us all. When they hit, they hurt, especially whenever you're a smaller brokerage or a brokerage that has, typically like Dudley, carries a lot of overhead to be able to train people and to offer the services that Dudley Land offers and offer the product that we do for the price that we do. There's a lot happening on the back end of that. And the fact that Tom were visionaries enough and were okay with carrying that load, and as good a business development people as they are, the fact that they made that commitment was what kind of drove Dudley forward, and it's where we're at today, and why me, Brent, and Steve get to kind of carry on that legacy, and hopefully do some things like that they've done and make it better, and continue it on. We go to we're third generation. Hopefully we go to a fourth and a fifth generation at some point. So we're currently looking for those people that are visionaries and want to do something special, and continue the Dudley Land name, and continue our success.
Yeah, for sure. Jack, how did you get out of, after 2009 and the housing crisis, what came next and how did you get to Derby?
We just wrestled our way through 2009 and began stood back up on our feet a little bit in 2010. And the CEO of Derby is a good friend of mine by the name of Steve Long. And I met Steve in, I believe it was 2003. And I met him by virtue of buying a lease from him, leased some minerals that he had. He was out in Texas County. And Steve's a rancher, farmer. He's got a big ranching farming operation, and but he's a landman by degree, and the family has some minerals. Steve always was invested in various ways in oil and gas, and so I bought that lease from him, and I remember, and it's one of the questions he asked me as advice to young landmen, and it was a deal where I knew he was important enough in the lease play or in the unit we were trying to put together. I needed to go see him. He was just the kind of guy that you needed to go see and not try to buy the lease on the phone or via, at that point in time, U.S. Postal Service pretty much. I guess we were beginning to email stuff. But so I went to Guyman and sat down with Steve, and we visited a long time and got that lease worked out. And he began to call me, and I began to do some little land projects for him. And Steve put a non-op fund together in the Arcoma Woodford, where we began. And well, actually, we started in the Fayetteville in Arkansas, and we worked over there for about a year on a project that we ended up flipping. And then we went to the Arcoma Woodford in southeast Oklahoma and built a little non-op company by, to quote Steve, by being smart, opportunistic landmen. So we did that project, and we Steve kind of stood down. We did some small stuff from 8, 9, 10, 11, and we went up and we looked at the Bakken a couple times. We went up there the first time, I think 2010, and just Steve didn't feel like the play was far enough down the learning curve. He felt like that the results would get better as they drilled more wells, and we went back up there and looked around in 2012 and decided that was the time to do it. And so we went to North Dakota and built that, bought leases, participated in wells, and built out one fund, and then put a second fund together in the Bakken and did the same. And then in 2017, and by that point in time, I was working as a contract landman pretty much in an in-house capacity, just overseeing all of Steve's stuff. And in 2017, Steve stood up Derby Energy, and we also have one other non-op fund, our Scoop LP fund. So we have 4 non-op funds, and then we have Derby Exploration Company, an operating company. And that's when I officially came in-house. So that was kind of my story from 9 to 17.
Amazing. Well, storied career, like I said. So I want to get advice for, field landmen as well. Field for the in-house landmen from field landmen. So you've had the experience on both sides now of being in-house, experience of broker, experience of field landman. How did your experience as a field landman influence you as an in-house landman today?
Well, I sure had understanding and significant insight into what my broker was dealing with in regards to what I was asking them to get done for me, because I spent most of my career out there on the front line. I think the thing that gets missed, there's multiple differences, I guess, but one of the things I've always said since I came in-house, if I'm ever asked by a younger landman that I have any advice, well, one bit of advice for in-house landman is that I would encourage them all to get up once a quarter at least and go to the field and talk to your surface owners and your mineral owners. If you really want to know the culture and the environment and what's going on, take a day, leave your office and go to the field and get with your field personnel and look at your wells. And I just think that's an invaluable thing to do. As far as or contract people coming in-house, well, before I leave that last subject, Brandon and I have talked about this. Today with technology, we do so much with emails and text messages and cell phones, but I'd highly encourage young landmen to understand that there are times that you need to get in your truck or your vehicle and go see somebody if you want to get a lease bought, a trade made. We can get a lot of it done on the phone and through emails, but sometimes you need to get face to face with people, and I think that's getting lost a little bit in all the technology, and you can kind of, if you focus on it, you'll get a feel for the times that you do. If you're listening hard to the guy on the other end of the line, you can get a feel pretty quickly. This is a guy I need to go see, rather than try to get this all done on the phone. So just to follow up on that, going to the field, it's the same thing. Sometimes you need to go get in front of somebody to make a trade. But on in-house guys, contract guys that come in-house, or what advice would there be to field guys to understand about the in-house? I think about this, Khalil, because it was fascinating to me. And that is understanding the economics or financials of what we do. to a more significant degree. Most brokers and field landmen are told by the in-house guys, the geologists, engineers, we want to own leases here. We're going to drill these kind of wells, and we've got this kind of authority for you to go try to buy leases. And but and I'd seen AFEs and so on and so forth, but to truly see the economics of how much these wells cost to drill, and then what kind of returns they'll make based upon the current commodity price, and to truly see the effect on those returns of a point of revenue interest in while negotiating a lease, or 2 points of revenue interest, or the difference in a 500 an acre lease play versus a 1,500 an acre lease play, and to see what that did to the economics of these wells. But it was fascinating to me. It just, because I know over my field career, there's plenty of times that I'm standing out there going, doggone, will my client just give me another $100 an acre and I can get this lease bought that they were wanting bought? Or another point to give the mineral owner the revenue, and they're saying, no, we can't do that. And I would struggle a little bit with understanding that. But when I think this point through, I mean, there's a kind of a natural barrier to the field guy getting exposed to the economic side of it, because that's real proprietary information. It's not the kind of thing that the in-house guy can say, hey, come on in here, let me show you everything. But I would encourage field guys to try to find a way to learn and to grasp better understanding of the economics of the oil and gas industry, and how what they're doing affects and relates to those economics. And so I would offer that bit of advice. And then the other thing's titles. I'm an older landman, and I just think if a guy really wants to be a landman, contractor, even in-house, you'll never go wrong by continually striving to improve your title skills. It's really important. Of course, in brokers, it's hard to manage that. And I know Brandon and Brent, Steve, and Havenstrite, Dudley, we all wrestle with it as brokers. And that is, you get a person that does something real good, like there's just a good lease buyer. Well, then he becomes your go-to lease buyer. And all your lease buying, you're funneling this guy, and some time goes by, and you kind of take inventory. Well, I need him to go do some title work over here, but he didn't have a lot of experience doing title work, because we've had him pigeonholed over here for 3 years buying our leases, and so I guess that's a bit of advice to brokers. If you got good quality people, try to cross-train them, try to teach them all sides of the industry, and try to resist how so often today we tend to compartmentalize it, and find somebody that does something well, and then we don't want to rock that boat,
I think you're exactly right, Jack. I think back, some of the most successful projects, best clients we have, they allowed their in-house landmen to get out to the field and talk to not only be around the broker, but also be around those contract landmen. Build a relationship with them as well. You can't always do that on every project. Some of them are small and short-termed, but on your longer projects and a place that you're making a commitment to, I think you're going to get more benefit out of your in-house landman spending, like I said, 3-4 days once a quarter with those field people. They really get understanding for what the market is in that particular area, or how the work has to be done in that particular area. And I think that's huge. When you talk about training, when did that start? When did we start kind of assembly lining, leasing and title and curative and right? Yeah. When did we start kind of assembly lining that? It had to be early 2000s when we really started making that segregation between title people and lease people.
That's exactly what I'd say, Brandon. I'd say it correlates a lot with technology. And I think we're probably going to talk about it a little bit. One of the questions you'd asked me to consider is how's the land industry changed over the course of my career? Well, the number one answer to that is technology. And I mean, the work we do is the type work and the quality of the work we do is still the same, or that we're striving to do, but technology's had the same effect on our discipline in the oil and gas industry as it has across the whole industry, across our whole culture, whether work related or even personal. And that is, how can we do it faster? How can we do more of it? And I think that in response to being driven by technology, that's when people really started getting compartmentalized. We need guys to do this, and let's teach them to do that. And
I just think back to when I started. My first project was in South Central Arkansas, and I went and ran the title. And then as the title was getting done, I went out and talked to landowners. I did the title, I bought the leases. It was the first shell play, which was the Fayetteville Shell, where you had your lease agents and you had your title people. And you were kind of the glue in between, taking information from both sides and entering it into a database or building lease packets or whatever the case may be. And just seemed to go really fast from there when now you started having people that just knew how to do title or just knew how to buy leases. And there's still a few of those around, but there's the few that know both sides or that have the ability to do both sides are extremely valuable. And we've tried to keep them in our shop as much as possible, and you're right. I think everybody should make an emphasis. If you're a lease buyer, you're valuable. But if you can learn how to run title, you're going to have both sides, and you're going to make yourself a lot more valuable, and you're probably going to stay with work for a lot longer.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
And that's just like you, Brandon. I mean, when I started, we were taught how to run title, but then we were expected, to type our ownership reports and pick up the phone and call the men owners who the title we ran and negotiate the leases and type out the leases. And so we were taught to do it all.
Same.
I think especially with the rise in technology, the specialists' roles can be really a weary path to tread down, because the generalist is able to understand the whole picture. Just like you were saying, Jack, if you're a field landman, if you can understand a little bit more of the economics of the in-house guy, it really helps the whole picture, and you're going to be able to make better decisions and understand the scope of the project, and probably have that better working relationship with your in-house landmen. So, and that's kind of what I want to talk about now. What are some of besides just the knowledge barriers that come into play, what makes a successful working relationship between the in-house landmen and the field landmen? We've already mentioned the ability to go out in the field regularly to understand what's going on in your areas and with your people, your personnel. What are some of the things that make a successful working relationship?
Well, it comes to my mind from the broker's perspective, the contractor's perspective, because you're trying to provide a service and a good service and give the client a quality deliverable. I think you got to be a really good listener. And at times you got to prod people a little bit, try to drag it out of them, but you got to understand where your client is and where they're trying to go and what parameters they have to give to you to get there. How much can we pay for these leases? How much time we got to get this done? But most importantly, what's the end objective? Where are we going? Because if you understand that, or I always felt like if I understood that as a broker, it helped me in my planning and strategies and, even personnel in trying to attack the task and deliver that high quality deliverable, get the job done for the client. So I would say I would suggest to work hard at getting your in-house landman to communicate with you and make clear to you what and where he's trying to get to, so that you can do your best to assist in getting that accomplished.
Yeah, Jack, I think there's two things that we like to talk to our clients about right up front. What are you trying to do? What's your goal? And then also, what are your reporting parameters? If we're working with an in-house landman, who are you reporting to and what are you going to have to report? What does that look like? Because the worst thing that can happen is you start a project and we send our client a report and it's not what they need, and they're reporting to their higher ups and it's not what they're looking at. So really, when you working with a broker, they need to know what your goal is and then what's your reporting parameters. At Dudley Land, we can modify our reports pretty simple. We just need to know what you're looking for and how you're going to report it. We can make your job a lot easier if we know that. You're not building the reports. We'll build your report for you and hand it off to you, have a meeting with you once a week so you understand what's in it.
Well said, Brandon. That's exactly what I was trying to say. And you got to be a little bit flexible. I mean, you want to adhere to, once you've got good processes built, I mean, you certainly want to adhere to them, but you still have to be a little bit flexible, because not every client's going to want the same type of reports and same type of deliverables, just like you're saying.
And, you've talked a little bit about how technology has impacted the industry since the start of your career. I'd like to kind of get your pulse on where you feel like the industry is going as a whole, Jack, over the next, several years, where you see things shifting and, changing a little bit.
I think that analytics, I'm exposed to some of these young guys and I watch what they do on the DI platforms and Pangea and just utilizing databases and that type of thing to see trends. So, technology is really affording the opportunity, if a person is willing to kind of get elbow deep into it, some great analytics. And that helps you oftentimes, not necessarily cut corners, but I would describe it as finding a shorter path to where I'm trying to get to. Analytics side of things comes to mind, especially for managers, in-house or project managers and brokers that are asking and getting the questions answered that Brandon was talking about. What kind of deliverables do you need, or reporting do you need? Where do you want to go? What's your goal? But then you got to go back. You got so much technology, so much information today that's available to you. You need to be pretty good at mining that information and analyzing it, and constantly trying to ask and answer the right questions of how can I get something done well and correctly, faster and and more quickly than maybe the way we used to do before we had all this data to mine and analyze.
Jack, I got a question for you. So we've seen, oil prices around $75 a barrel right now. We've seen the gas price go from, kind of steady around $7 down to $2.40 over the last 3 months. We're seeing this renewables market and carbon capture market, battery storage market come into play. How do you see, or do you see, what's your kind of perception over the next 10 years for, the oil and gas market as it relates to land work?
Well, I think brokers, Brandon, that are doing the kind of things DLC's doing, and I know there are other good brokers out there doing it as well, are doing the right thing in that we've got to get involved in the renewables. We've got to understand what's going on in the renewables and what our place and our role is there to assist, because they are now part of the energy spectrum, and I think are going to continue to grow and be a greater part over years to come. At the same time, I'm a fan of Chris Wright's at Liberties, and I think like most oil and gas guys, we understand and know that we're going to be using oil and gas for a long time, and so we still got to maintain that skill set. But I think a good landman, again, kind of back to title and leasing, like we were talking about compartmentalizing, guys, the more skill set you've got, the more arrows you can put in your quiver as a landman. I can do title work. I can negotiate leases. I can do due diligence. I understand, about permitting for solar farms or windmills or that type of thing. I've worked on some of these projects. The more you broaden your skill set, more quivers you have in the arrow, the better off you are. And certainly as a brokerage firm, you've got to try to cover all those bases because it's a growing part of our industry. So that's what I think. But I'm going to leave that to you young guys too, Brandon. Because I think, holy cow, it's interesting, guys. I went to a time management seminar. This is like 2001. Priority management, just a time management workshop about using a calendar and Outlook and stuff to manage your time. And one of the things I'll never forget, the guy said, he said Harvard University had done a study in 99 or 2000, I guess 2000. And they reported from that study that they felt like from 1980 to 2000, because of cell phones and text messages and emails and the internet, that the average person and cable TV, it went from 3 or 4 or 5 channels to hundreds, but that people were dealing with 70 times more information on a daily basis than they did in 1980, 20 years prior. And now it's been 23 years since then, and who knows what that number is today, but I can always relate to that. I mean, it's like, I think about it today, and the question you asked me about the renewables in the future there, I happen to be at the end of my career and kind of look at all that and think, man, I'm glad I don't have to learn all that too. I try to cover those bases too, because I know you need to. I know that's the future. And but I'm thinking I got enough information pounding me from all directions to jump into something new today. But it's certainly needs to be done by younger guys that are going to continue to be landmen for years to come.
I know you've already given some advice, Jack, for the landmen of the future, but what are some other things besides just, get out there and see people in person that you can offer to the young landmen that are listening today?
Boy, being a hard worker, it's such a huge thing in my generation. I mean, we just grew up. I had a granddad, and he basically said it just like this. He said, son, if you work hard, and if you do right by people, in the end, you ought to win. And so I've always adhered to that. I've always been willing to work hard. I've always kind of wanted to pride myself in being a guy that worked for. Hell, I've had to work hard, because I've always felt like I probably never was the sharpest tack in many boxes. So I had to get up and hustle and work hard. My advice to young landmen, you got to be consistent. I mean, if you're going to be a landman, if you really want to be a landman, make the commitment to it, to make a career out of it. And be willing to pay the price that it takes to be successful. And that's going to be hard work, and you got to be dependable, and you got to be consistent. You got to be willing to learn and never stop learning. And you got to be, honest. You got to bring a lot of integrity. I mean, we're negotiating all the time and on behalf of clients, and you've got to work hard to ensure you maintain your integrity. And again, I go back because it seems to me that it's a little bit lost on some of our younger generation. They don't grasp the concept of paying a price to be successful. I mean, if you want to be successful, you're generally going to have to work hard at it. I got a quiver of grandkids today, and I tell them, look, it don't matter if it's math or volleyball or basketball or baseball or art or playing the violin. If you want to be good at something, you got to work at it. You got to put in the time and sacrifice, make some sacrifices and work at it. It's not going to just come, most things to most kids or most young people, it just come easy. I guess there's a few, but most of the time you got to pay a price and work at it. So encourage young landmen to be willing to work hard.
Very wise, Jack. You said you're nearing the end of your career. Where are we going to be finding Jack in a few years' time? Are you going to be on the golf course? Are you going to be at the lease?
The golf course, the hunting lease, my toes in the sand on the beach, and maybe chasing some grandkids around the volleyball tournaments or basketball tournaments or choir concerts. Seeing one, I got one. Gosh, that kid can sing like a doggone. He's just unbelievable. He's made the All-State Junior High Choir for 2 years running, and it was kind of fun. I got a big old family at our family Christmas get together. There's about 50 of us there, and we huddled up to say a prayer. And I said, let's sing a Christmas carol. And I turned to this grandson and I said, James, pick a Christmas carol and sing it for us. And they had just been singing God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, I guess, in his choir class. And he breaks out to it, just closes his eyes, starts singing. The whole room is going, wow, this kid is. 2 years ago, he was a tenor, and then last year he was a baritone, and this year he's a bass. And so I'm going to be chasing grandkids. I'm off on a tangent now.
No, that's good.
Talking about Jamie and how beautifully he sings. But that's what I see myself doing. And still, I want to hang around a little bit, maybe doing something. I mean, Brandon calls me and says, hey, I got something. What you think? But yeah, I'm with people I like in a small project and something like that, maybe still doing a little work, but that's where I see myself.
I'll send you some title, Jack. Well,
there you go.
Keep you around as long as we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Well, Jack, this has been a pleasure getting to chat with you. Thanks for your wisdom, your stories, sharing about your career. Send this to your grandkids too. They need to know about Jack's history, right?
I might do that. I hadn't thought about that, but I might. But I've enjoyed it too, guys.
Thank you, Jack.
We appreciate you, and we'll see you around.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Land Department. Check out our website in the show notes or visit dudley-land.com to learn more about us.